Hi, I'm Ruben Morales, Senior Vice President for External Engagement at Wells Fargo. And we at Wells Fargo are so proud to partner with the Latino Coalition in supporting small businesses around the country. Wells Fargo is the #1 bank helping Hispanic families purchase homes, and we're a top bank for SBA loans to small businesses. So we're always looking for opportunities to better serve the Latino community, and especially Latino and Latina-owned small businesses. Thank you so much for watching. We hope you learn a lot. And if you need more information, always feel free to click on wellsfargo.com/biz for more information to help your small business. Thanks.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on our monthly Hot Topics series. My name is Delia Marin, Chief Operating Officer for the Latino Coalition. On behalf of TLC, we are thankful for your support. Our hope is to educate, inspire, and guide all business owners, entrepreneurs, and members of the Latino Coalition with our hot topics, their support in helping to make this series possible. Our next Matchpoint webinar will be on November 17th, How to Master Writing a Capability Statement for Your Business. Mark your calendar and be sure to come back and join us again on the 17th. For now, we leave you in great hands with our moderator for today, Danny Vargas, National Director for the Latino Coalition. Welcome, Danny.
I'm muted. Sorry about that. Delia, thank you so very, very much. I appreciate the introduction. And thank you everyone for joining us today on our 3rd episode of our Hot Topics series, where we have a great panel to discuss financial support roadmap for business success. As Delia mentioned, I am Danny Vargas. I'm the National Director for the Latino Coalition, and I am so pleased to introduce you to our incredible guests speakers for today. First, a longtime and dear friend, District Director with the Small Business Administration, Mr. Michael Barrera, as well as a new friend, Business Liaison Consultant with Wells Fargo, Joseph Trimble. I'll introduce Michael first. Michael is responsible for the oversight of approximately $861 million of annual financial contracting dollars and $338 million of annual lending guarantees through the Kansas City District Office. Michael is an experienced attorney with over 30 years of business, government, legal, and nonprofit experience, along with an extensive history with the small business community. And he's such a dear friend that we've known each other for so long. Joseph Trimble serves as the Vice President and Small Business Leader for Wells Fargo's Central Region. Trimble joined Wells Fargo in 2001, and since then has held numerous roles at different locations within the bank's consumer banking division. Currently, Joseph is responsible for building Wells Fargo's engagement strategy with business owners in the $0 to $5 million revenue segment by educating and developing talented small business relationship managers in the Central Time Zone. Michael and Joseph, thank you so very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Danny. I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
I'll second that. Thank you so much for having me.
And I really appreciate it. We've got 3 different time zones represented today, I think. Which is really interesting because I'm in the DC area. So before we jump into the conversation, I think it's important for us to share some statistics to get a better sense of the obstacles Latino-owned businesses face. So first of all, 20% of small businesses fail within the first year. And that's unfortunate, but it's a reality of business life. 59% of entrepreneurs who apply for a loan use it to expand their businesses. Entrepreneur demographics for 2018 show us that 43% of business owners use the funds to cover their operating expenses. So it appears that loans play a huge part in the world of small businesses as enterprises rely heavily on them both to keep afloat and make crucial steps towards their future. According to CB Insights, the second most common reason that affects 29% of businesses is the lack of funds. So in a word, it could lead to bankruptcy. So it's unfortunate. So they need capital. Businesses faced major challenges in 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In 23% of the cases, the biggest of these challenges was the lack of capital. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is the lifeblood of business, and that's access to capital. So Michael, we'll start with you as the Small Business Administration District Director for the Kansas City region. How do new and existing businesses get funds to start or maintain or grow their businesses?
Well, Dan, I guess I'll address it in two different ways. You've had I would call it the pandemic stage of a small business and a regular stage of a small business. During the pandemic stage, the SBA did its part. We actually had our PPP loans, which are no longer available, but now we have EIDL loans, which are the emergency loans that business can get right now. Right now, we have loans still available at a 3.75% rate for 30 years for those who want money for their operating capital. So those funds are still available. But normally, I think the most important thing to do is get ready. You have to when you go apply for a loan, and remember, the SBA normally does not give the money directly, except for these auto loans we have. We don't normally give money directly. We rely on our banking partners, our banking lenders, who are actually going to give you the money. And things they're going to be looking for, and I'm sure Joe will jump in on this, is that we look at your credit history. We want to be sure we can be paid back. You want to be sure that they will look at your business plan. Well, one thing that I always tell people to remember this name SCORE. SCORE is a very important partner of ours that will help a business get ready to prepare their loan package, to have them get ready for what they need to do in order to apply for a loan. Also, what's important to do is that be sure you have no debt, particularly government debt. If you have a government debt, it's gonna be hard to get an SBA loan. Make sure that you have done your taxes properly. Because one thing we found in this last pandemic, a lot of businesses were not able to get funds that they wanted because they didn't prepare their taxes properly. So be sure you have that. Have a banking relationship. One thing we found is that those firms that kind of come into last and have a banking relationship, it took them longer or it made it more difficult to get the loans that they need. So have that banking relationship. There's a lot of things that we can go to, but I would tell people to always know about SBA.gov. And when you get to that website, you'll see at the top of the page, funding options. Click on that, and that gives you all the different loans that we have, and it gives you kind of a background of what you need to get a loan.
That's excellent. So, Michael, thank you for that incredible sage advice. Now we'll turn to Joseph from a banking perspective. What are some of the programs that are available to your clients to help them with the funding that their businesses need?
Yeah, I think it's important to start where we came from, which Michael referred to PPP. And since 2020, Wells Fargo has given or provided 282,000 PPP loans to small businesses, which what I find most important is that kept 1.7 million people employed in those small businesses. Now, since we're entering, to use Michael's words, that normal operation, or the new normal of operating a small business is what I like to refer to it as, we're moving back into traditional lending. And that's where, as a financial institution, where we support small businesses. I think about some of the recent interactions I've had with small business owners, and where we help support them is in terms of that immediate lending opportunity, like a business credit card or a business line of credit, to help meet those day-to-day transactional opportunities, or even to focus on that supplemental revenue stream, which can be created from that line of credit. So now that we're back into the traditional lending platform, what we're educating our bankers around, and I highly recommend to use Michael's advice, having a banking relationship is extremely important, because those are the traditional forms of lending for your business. And I know today we'll spend more time talking about those other opportunities as well.
No, absolutely. I appreciate that, Joseph. And frankly, to be honest with you, many small business owners like myself take advantage of a variety of those different options and have them stackable in a lot of different ways. So whether it's credit cards, lines of credit, or PPP loans, et cetera. So that brings me to back to Michael. So there's been a lot of talk about the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program. You mentioned earlier that those funds are no longer available. What is available still for small business owners looking to the Small Business Administration for help and support and assistance in getting the funding they need?
Well, thanks, Danny. For the PPP, we did 11.6 million loans on that, close to over $800 million on that particular loan product. And then we went into the EIDL loans, and those are actual loans, because the PPP, if you apply for forgiveness, more than likely you got forgiven. Not everybody did, but most people did on this one. But that's not a traditional program. That's something that we had the restaurant revitalization fund, which went to over 100,000 businesses. but that money ran out as well. I know they're trying to get more funded right now. I can't say when or if that will come back. Right now, we have our idle loans. We have our 7A, our traditional 7A loans, which the banks all know about. We have our 50, and the 7A loans is for your operating capital to refinance possibly debt. So again, that you have to have the precursors. Be sure you're ready for the loan. And what the SBA does, we guarantee 90% of that loan. That makes it easier for a bank to loan money for that, because they're willing to take more risk. We also have our 504 loans, and we also have micro lending. So we have different funding options for small business to look at. And I always tell people to do this. Go to the SBA website, sba.gov, look at funding options. But there's a section called Lender Match, which you'll put in basically your zip code, and it'll give you the different lenders that are SBA approved lenders that you can probably work with. And also, you can also sba.gov /local-assistance, and you can find out the local different SCORE offices, your local SBA office that you can work with. So those are all very, very important resources for a small business.
And that's right. And I just want to emphasize and highlight and bold and italicize and underline the importance of having a business relationship with a bank. I think that's crucial and vital for any small business owner. You've got to have a banking relationship to make anything happen as it relates to capital. So the next question I'm going to ask, I'll let both of you chime in, and maybe we'll start with Joseph. But the path to starting a business, to opening a business is different and unique, depending on the business owner, depending on markets and the type of business that it is. Some of them start off very small and others have high expenses. So how do business owners getting started, how can they start to determine how much funding they might need for their particular business? So Joseph, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, the first thing, I always discuss with a brand new business owner is really to understand their business plan. I think that's where, for a business owner, you start to put some of those actionable items on paper. And where I hone in, since it's my background, is in that step 2, which talks about the financial components of the business. And the one thing, Denny, that I really see business owners do well in terms of understanding the future for their business is really starting to map out and project what cash flow will look like. From a traditional lending standpoint, here at a financial institution, that cash flow component for us is critical to understanding how will that business make money. It's that ins and outs that we need to understand in order to feel confident in terms of the lending. Now, if I'm a business owner, really I would focus on 2 key assumptions that would help drive my thought process around that projection of the cash flow. I would center around receivables, which these assumptions should really outline how quickly you receive payments from your customers. For example, if most of your customers pay you within 30 days, a key assumption could be 90% of sales will be collected the month after the sale. Now, that assumption, depending on what that answer is, based on your business, based on your industry, if those receivables start to stretch out beyond that 30 days, that's where, for me, that credit discussion comes into play, because now we need to figure out how we prevent any negative cash flow from happening within that business. And then assumption number 2 is around my payables. These assumptions really should outline when your payments are due. I get when it's a brand new business that can be somewhat difficult, but this is why we have business plans, because we as good business owners need to really predict the future and predict that roadmap or that process to get us from point A to point B. And in this assumption, for example, if your vendors require payment within 2 weeks of delivery, so that gap between receivables and payables becomes evident, then a key assumption should be in this section that payables are due within 14 days of purchase. That timing between those two, from the moment you pay to the moment you collect, that's where gaps in cash flow happen. And that's where I love to talk to business owners about potentially using credit to prevent any negative cash flow from happening.
And that has a direct impact on their ability to grow as well, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Getting clients. Michael, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, just a couple things. Like everything you said is so true. But also the new normal has a couple different things. You have to have disaster planning. Any type of business plan, what's your disaster planning in case something goes wrong? If you look at the last 20 years, 9/11, I was with the SBA when 9/11 occurred. Left SBA, came back. I was here when they had the hurricanes in Texas and Florida and Puerto Rico. And then we had what happened, the pandemic. The disaster is inevitably going to happen. You have to have some kind of plan for that. Also, what's changed is the new normal is that your employee plan. It used to be, you used to know your consumer market, but you better know your employee market now because the employee market has changed. One thing back 20 years ago, when I was a manager, I could say do this because I want you to do it. Then it changed to do this. Will you please do this? Now I want you to do this, and this is why I want you to do this. This is why we need to do this together. So the employees have changed because they're looking for life balance, and you can't necessarily blame them because they've gone through more. I mean, the biggest thing when you were a young man, the biggest challenge happened was the gas crisis. Now look, everything that's happened to anyone that was born 20 years ago that they've gone through. So the employee has changed. You got to have a cybersecurity plan. So there's a lot of other different plans that you have. A traditional business plan you may not have had to have in the past, but nowadays you have to have that in addition to your accounts receivable and payables and know those numbers as well.
Now, Michael, when I was a young man, I think the biggest challenge was learning the printing press. I mean, that was.
So this copier thing work.
That's right. Yeah. So no, those are all incredibly important pieces of advice, but we also know that a bunch of small business owners, 62% of small business owners use their own personal funds to deal with financial challenges that they have to face, which are inevitable. To your point, Michael, about disasters, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when and how you deal with it. So in terms of using their own personal finances, is this something that you would recommend that they do, or what should a new small business owner start with in terms of their own personal finances?
And I'll let Joe take this, but I will say that they're going to want you to put something in the game. They want to know whether it be a banker or SBA, you got to have some skin in the game. And unless you're going to try to get a grant, and there's not that many grants as people think there are. You're going to have traditional lending programs. So you're going to have to put some money in the game. A lot of folks go to credit cards. They may go to relatives or friends, but they really want something in the game. That way they know that you're putting something at risk as well.
I know that's how I started my business. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And I would definitely agree with Michael. I think it's okay to initially start that way, Danny, but I do believe at a point, and this is where that plan comes into play based on what Michael just shared, depending on what that plan looks like, that roadmap, there is a moment where we have to sever using that personal funds to continue to provide the necessary income to help our business continue to thrive. Now, for me, and where I usually go when this topic comes up, it's not to deter business owners from starting that way, but it really is to plant the seed that there are things outside of just your funding. And you mentioned a couple, whether it be personal credit vehicles, it could be family or friends, it could be investors that come into play, but there are other opportunities out there, from tax credits that have been built today to help support business owners, whether it be retaining employees or even working to add employees to your small business to keep morale. But then even beyond that, and we mentioned one already, the loan component, but also those grants that are out there. And at Wells Fargo, and we're not the only financial institution, but we've provided $420 million back into nonprofits in our communities to help support small businesses when they're looking for those capital considerations to help operate their business. And those nonprofits are community development financial institutions, micro lenders. We work a lot with the Opportunity Finance Network, which has that community development financial institution locator, so you can find one near you. And I would definitely recommend for our listeners that they know that 84% of those funds are going to diverse business owners. And for me, that takes us down that path of helping businesses succeed without having to necessarily put everything they own into the project or the idea or the venture to really get that business going, because there are viable options elsewhere.
Yeah. And he makes a great point, Dan, because if you go to the SBA.gov local assistance, you can sign up with your local SBA office and you'll get the first, emails about what's going on, what new programs are coming down with the SBA. So you get advance notice. So we encourage people to go to that local assistance, to your local SBA office, and you'll get emails. We send out emails about what's happening in our district. And a lot of things that we send out are what's coming from headquarters. So that's a good way for folks to kind of get ahead of the game.
And I want to go back to that grant question in a moment, but before we do that, it brings up an interesting question. You talked about CDFIs, and we talked about banks, and we've talked about different institutions. So why don't we take a moment just to sort of run down sort of the key similarities and differences between a bank, a CDFI, and maybe a credit union, so people have a sense of, a small business might have a variety of options to pick from. It might be different depending on their needs. So you want to take a moment, just either one.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I'll start with the traditional lending component and move into some of the other areas that you said, Danny. But for a financial institution, a traditional lender, we are federally regulated, meaning we do have requirements we have to abide by to ensure that we are lending in an appropriate manner, and also finding lending options for customers when lending is needed. So we are in that space. Now, one of the others you mentioned, which are community development financial institutions, those are typically nonprofit organizations. And of course, typically a financial institution like us will help support that type of an organization, because what they can do that we can't is lend in different ways. We're very restricted depending on what the type of lending request is in terms of dollar amount, collateral, term. That's where these CDFIs really start to spread their wings, if it's because they can bring other options to the table for our customers. And typically, as a financial institution, we work hand in hand to help support that business growth component, because also they don't typically do the banking side of the business. They're more for that lending component. Now, credit unions, they are member owned, which that brings an advantage to the table. Now, credit unions do have, of course, rules and regulations that they abide by, different and outside of that CDFI bucket, but they definitely have options based on what that member organization can put together in terms of that lending space. And you said it earlier, Danny, if I'm a savvy business owner, I'm looking at every single option, because if I don't know what's out there, and that's the hard part, we don't know what we don't know, but working with these organizations, it helps you have those seeds planted. So when things do come up, you have an outlet to fall back on.
Yeah. Michael, did you want to chime in on that?
I think that's an excellent response. And with the grants that are out there, it depends who you're trying to get your grant from. If you're getting them from the federal government, there's a whole thing on grants.gov. And if you've been through that, it's not easy. It's going to have, because with the federal government, it's going to be a lot more different than going through a city area or through a private organization. So you got to know which one you're going through, but they're going to require a lot of information. And again, you got to have your taxes done and have your taxes done properly. Credit union, like you said, they're member organizations. They have a little bit more different rules, different requirements. So that's important to know the different ones that are out there and what they, and the different requirements that they have. But I think they all have one common thing in common. One thing in common: can you pay the money back? And can you show the cash flow to be able to pay the money back? So that's always going to be very, very important. And have your business plan ready to go, because that really, and people think that's an exercise they have to do, but it really is a good exercise for you, because a business plan is a living document. You can change it as you go along, because some of your business model may change. So I think we've seen a lot of folks in the last pandemic, a lot of people's business model changed. It's really been amazing how it's changed, how restaurants went from sit down to delivery, how they do a carry out. So how they use the use of internet or technology a lot more. So your business plan changes, but it's always good to have it there ready for yourself.
That's great. Thank you for that input. And I'm going to throw you both a bit of a curveball. So I'm going to paint a scenario, and I want you to get your thoughts on it. So a small business starts off, and they run through a great problem to have. They land a big client, right? And they don't have a whole lot of money saved up in their bank account, but they've got to be able to buy supply and buy inventory in order to fulfill the contract requirements and so forth. So they've got a big invoice that they can start putting together for the customer, but they don't have the cash in the bank to be able to pay for the inventory that they need, whether it's people or supplies and so forth. So in that situation, what I've seen in many instances, and what I've done, frankly, with my company, is find ways to be able to get receivables-based financing. Different ways to be able to do them, different names for it, et cetera, factoring and so forth. So can you each take a moment to sort of describe some of the different options that you've seen that are receivables-based financing?
So let's take the first crack at it.
Yeah, so I'm definitely seeing that as a strategy to support the ability to obtain lending. And what you're referring to is really using a projected look at what you're going to be getting or earning or collecting from customers. Now, the one thing that when I review that as an option for our business owners, the piece that you have to ensure you have intact is the ability to generate receivables. So for me, and here's a good chance for me to plug our local chambers of commerce, because I feel that's where they can step in to really help you map out, is that a viable option for your business? So I like it as a strategy, but I do always put that in a business owner's mind that you do have to generate the receivables. So what happens if that takes a dip? Let's say pandemic hit and we were in that boat, how would we obtain those receivables? So here's back to that plan. You have to have, and Michael, you said it, that disaster component built in, because you should have an option A to pivot to, an option B to pivot to, and maybe even an option C because of where our current economic standings are. That way, when you do types of lending like that, you don't put your business in a place where it can't repay, especially if you're not generating the income in.
And what's important on that as well is, particularly if you're doing like something like federal contracting, when that happens a lot, you may get that big federal contract, but you can't service it. And sometimes it may be best that you don't get it. You hate to say that, but it doesn't matter what you keep. It doesn't matter what you make. It matters what you keep. And if you can't keep that business going, it doesn't matter how big of a contract you got, because if you have a bad record of servicing a contract, that may hurt your business in the long run. So there's different ways of getting that financing, but the federal government, nothing's going to happen quick. So you're going to go through a federal program. It very seldom is going to happen quick, but it will happen. It's just got to be sure you stick with it. And again, have all your finances ready to go and have that backup plan, like Joe said.
And frankly, I'll throw out just a couple of other notions as it relates to that, particularly in federal contracting. There are ways also to be able to structure a deal in the public sector with the federal government, where because of maybe your socioeconomic status and so forth, you're able to negotiate a faster turnaround in terms of paying invoices. So that's number one. Number two, on the private sector, you can negotiate contracts that maybe you can invoice in advance as opposed to in arrears. So there are different ways to be able to sort of manage and negotiate so that cash flow crunches aren't as severe and as damaging to a company's potential to be able to deliver. And any thoughts on those kinds of things?
Well, it sounds like you've got the right plan, because every business is going to be different. Every situation is going to be different. So having that knowledge, it sounds like you have the knowledge to know that. And that's part of your business plan, and working with your scores, your SBDCs that can help prepare you for those type of negotiations and help get you ready for them. And actually having that relationship with the banker. Bankers can be very, very helpful in helping you negotiate what you're going to try to accomplish. So that's why it's important having that relationship with the bankers and chambers. In fact, I saw a survey here in Kansas City. It said those who had a relationship with the bank or a chamber had a 38% better chance of getting the loans that they need, because they're networking, they're learning different ways of doing things. Just like what you said today, a lot of folks may not have known that, but for them coming to a seminar like this or being part of a chamber, having a banking relationship, they may have learned that.
Yeah. It goes back to the skin in the game that you talked about. It doesn't always have to be in the form of dollars. It can also be in the form of education and building your own network to help provide. To your question, Danny, I always summarize how I support a business owner in this space by talking to the sense. So staying on top of potential risk. This is where, as business owners, that skin in the game can come in the form of just being an expert in your industry by learning from the news and or keeping an eye on any resources provided specifically for your industry type. The second component is analyze. So when you see potential risk, do something about it today by developing what if scenarios. This will help you prevent those cash flow crunches. And then it moves you into the third component of how I help business owners identify and work through a problem, which is the configure component, which is now once you've analyzed the situation, here's where you have a chance to go back and update your business model. And I can't say it enough. when a business owner sticks to their plan and continues to revisit it, they are more successful. When we create the plan and put it in a drawer and never look at it again, then we're planning to fail. So really looking and understanding and making those changes will help you prevent any disruptions. And, you know, one of our, I'll throw out another hurdle right now, but those supply chains are big right now in forms of what's causing the biggest pain point. So you have to know what happens when your margins are affected. What if costs go up? How are you going to continue to create that margin that you set out to make? And it may be a product enhancement. It may be you going out and challenging how you receive the product from your distributor or how it's manufactured. And that's why I like going through this process of really building your sense, analyzing the situation, and then configuring a plan.
You know, it's fascinating that I'm here with two incredible business professionals talking about financing, and the conversation, as I say this as a marketing guy, has shifted to marketing. It's because
you got to generate the income.
Got to generate the income, because it's the 4 Ps, you know, product, price, promotion in place. It's really important that we continue to make sure that our products and services are attractive to the customers we're going after, that the pricing is set so that not only can we win the business, but we can keep as much money in the company as possible. That's the margin piece of it that, Michael, you were talking about earlier, because frankly, if you price it properly and if you keep as much money as you can in the company in terms of profit, you're self-financing at that point, right? So you don't need to turn to outside sources as much as you otherwise might, if you're able to generate more and more profit and margin. Does that make sense? I hope so.
Totally. It's not unlike a football game. You can go with your game plan beginning of the game, but you're getting killed at halftime. If you don't adjust, you're going to get killed even worse. Sometimes you've got to make adjustments to finish the game and to win the game.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. So I'm going to throw you one last curveball, just because we have a few extra minutes here. So I'll give you a different scenario this time. So that small business owner that just started out and had to be creative in terms of negotiating, you know, whether it was factoring for receivables-based financing, or whether it was negotiating the turnaround time for the invoices, you know, the net terms and so forth. So fast forward 10, 15, 20 years later, that small business person is now successful, but he's got another big opportunity. And they approach him and say, you know, maybe if you sell off a piece of the company, you might be able to get that infusion of cash to be able to continue to grow. That's a whole different set of hurdles. Have you faced some of that in your dealings with small business owners?
Go ahead, Joe.
So I definitely have. Now, the one piece that I feel like business owners who have been in business have lost sight of is what their value of their business is and what they can bring to the table. You know, I always think back to capability statements for business owners, and plug the next program here in our series. But for me, that's where I believe business owners still have an opportunity. I don't think I definitely don't see it as a bad thing to look at potential buybacks, but I would definitely consider having a business advisor that I can go to have a discussion around what am I getting rid of in terms of selling off in order to get income back. And here's the idea: in today's world, there are options aplenty in terms of obtaining financing outside of the traditional space. I mean, grants would be something that I would lean on personally if it was my business, especially after 20 years, to potentially look at how can I serve potentially a new market, or maybe expand into and start to support other business owners. We hear some key catchwords right now, like supplier diversity and procurement, and it may just be an opportunity for you to tweak your plan to approach a new market. So not to go back to the market conversation, but I definitely would want to have that conversation first before making any decisions in terms of giving up ownership of my business, because a lot of the business owners I've talked to, it's one of the hardest things to do. And then you have more hands in the pot who operate your business. And then of course it could help grow your business, but I have seen instances where it can stifle business growth until all parties involved can work out a current business plan in order to continue to provide or grow the business in the way that the original business owner wanted to.
And on that, I think what he said is true. You got, not only do you have the relationship with your bank, you got to have a relationship with with an accountant
Mhm.
and an attorney, the right kind of an attorney. It's like you go to a doctor for a foot problem, you don't go to a heart doctor. Have the right have the right attorney that's going to help you make some of these decisions. And like you have your business advisor. If you've been in business 20 years, that business becomes part of the family. And people, it's hard for them to let it go. But you know, you don't keep, most people don't keep their family around 20 years. You let them go to go do their own thing. But you know, you have to have that consultation with new talent that you brought in that may have access to markets that you didn't have to when you first got there. You're bringing new talent, and this new talent you're bringing in, hopefully bringing some new ideas, and they can actually, and you can assess as a team whether or not selling off a part of the business is the right thing to do or not to do. Again, you're consulting your accountant for long term, consulting your attorney for long term impact or whatever you do.
Right. No, absolutely. That's 100% accurate. You know, and then the last question I'll throw out there, since we were talking about federal government contracting earlier, another option that a lot of small businesses turn to is, instead of struggling really hard to get a prime contract, which in some cases it's challenging to get a prime contract with at a federal level with a federal government agency, they'll subcontract. And when you're a subcontractor, there are pros and cons. There are, you know, challenges and opportunities there, but it might be a way to be able to get a foot in the door with a federal government contract, to where you don't have to bite the entire apple, but you can take smaller pieces of it. And the prime contractor might be more flexible in terms of your ability to invoice them, and they've got a higher cash flow, et cetera. So, you know, there are ways to be able to do that. So, Michael, as someone who's been around federal government contracting for a long time, what are your thoughts in terms of the prime sub relationships?
I always tell folks when you're first getting into it, and when I used to be president of the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and we always used to complain that there were not enough contracts for Hispanic businesses. We can talk about how many Hispanic businesses are there, but how many are really ready for federal contracting. It is not an easy arena to get into, but once you're into it, you can do very, very well. I think sometimes we used to encourage folks to get the subcontract, learn how the thing works, learn how the different relationships you're going to need. And then sometimes we said, go do go do city and state contracting to learn what some of the terminologies are. Also, we encourage people to get into our 8A program if you're an underserved market, or get into the hub zone, which has no time limit. So learn the different, like you said, learn the different loan programs, learn about the different contracting programs, because there's not quote an Hispanic designation for federal contracting, but there are designations that you can take advantage of.
Okay. And go ahead, Joseph.
I definitely give a plug for the 8A program. I've seen firsthand that businesses that participate in that program receive training and technical assistance. And Michael, that's where I heard you going in terms of, are you ready to take on that full contract? Because what will happen, and the hardest part I feel anyways in that procurement space, is really understanding what are you being asked to complete, or how will you get paid for the project you worked on. And that's where that 8A, I feel like, gives you a better foothold in understanding what to expect in terms of those federal opportunities or even state opportunities, to help you be prepared. Because again, knowing what your business is capable of, what you can do well, is where you should center your time. Taking on too much can be as detrimental as not even taking or being at the plate to take a swing for the fences. You have to make sure you're capable of doing what you can do.
You know, funny, I got a funny story. I used to have, I used to run federal contracting for the SBA many years ago. People would come and ask me, what does the federal government need? And I'll go into business. No, you've got to be in business already, and tell us what you have, and what can an agency use from you? You can't just take that approach to it.
Right. Yeah. And not to turn this into a government contracting episode of the Hot Topic series, but you're right. I mean, there are benefits to each of those. So 8A, as an 8A company myself, and going through the hub zone process, there's opportunities to take advantage of the benefits of Hub Zone, with you've got a 10% buffer there in terms of pricing. That means more margin. There's women-owned small business. I'm a service-disabled veteran-owned small business as well. So there are lots of set-aside programs, and the government's always having to try to work hard to meet their goals for these different programs. So if government contracting is within your wheelhouse and within your business plan, these are a lot of things that you can definitely talk to your SCORE representative. You can talk to PTAX about it. So there are lots of different resources. You can look at some of our programs here at Matchpoint and TLC to learn some of those terminologies, because you're right, Michael. Just even learning the terms can be challenging.
A whole new language.
So with that being said, I'm just going to open it up to both of you to share any final thoughts that you might have for our audience.
Go ahead, Joe.
Right. So I think today, if I was to summarize the conversation, I would put some terms to what we talked about. And really, it's all about capital considerations. And as a small business owner, one of the activities that you could do on a consistent basis is explore these strategies to help ensure that money today or money tomorrow does not stand in the way of where you want your business to go. And I know we talked about it early on, but depending on the type of organization you're interacting with, whether it be a traditional lender, a community development financial institution, or a credit union, this is where that cash flow component of your business will come into play. You've heard it a few times from each of us. Your ability to repay the debt is really a good indicator of, are you debt ready? And if that's not the case, lean on these community organizations, the Latino Coalition, our local chambers of commerce, build that network so you have an opportunity to not only improve the insights you're receiving, but you also then improve your connections. And today's world, we know that the social media use has gone extremely way up, especially during pandemic. But what we haven't really analyzed is what are the outcomes from that increase in your social media space. And for me, that's where I feel like business owners can really gain what they need to know and really how to operate their small business more effectively. And don't be afraid to ask questions. I think I push on that most with business owners, because once you get someone in your network, you squander it when you don't reach out to find out how the two of you can support each other, and really building almost a contracting statement to the two of you, or depending on how many people you're doing this with. So that way there's an incentive for both of you to continue to grow the relationship. I see a lot of hellos and I know that person, but when I ask what work they've done together, that's usually when they look at me with the blank face. And for me, that's what I'm really emphasizing. It's not so much of using the tools, but really taking the tools and making them your own, and then really asking questions around the tools to build that network component within your own small business.
Great advice. Cash flow is king.
I agree with everything Joe says. And I think things may change. With the COVID, we've done a lot of these type of webinars, which is kind of cut down on the networking to a certain extent. And I think people are really looking forward to getting those live events where you can start networking. And I think the biggest mistake a lot of folks make when they go to a networking event, they stick to themselves. You're there to meet people, and it's not easy. And don't be afraid to get turned down. Don't be afraid to nobody not respond to you, but don't be afraid to ask. Like, just, you got to ask, and ask for the order. You can't get an order unless you ask for the order. So I think preparedness, flexibility is really important. Steadfastness, you got to keep going after it, and relationship building is so important. And with the SBA, go to the SBA.gov and you see the different funding programs that we have. You learn about those as much as you can. Read them and have someone help you, like SCORE, SBDCs, your local banking relationships. They're all willing and ready to help you if they can. And if they say no the first time, get ready, find out what you did, and go back and ask the second time. Because there's a lot of business out there for people to do, a lot of relationships for people to take advantage of, but don't take advantage of people. Just to be going to things with the partnership.
Lots of great advice. cash flow, knowledge, preparation, planning, relationships, etc. All of that stuff and more is going to be vital to make sure that our small businesses are able to succeed and thrive. So it's plug time, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for our Hot Topic series to discuss financial support roadmap for business success.
Thanks, Danny.
Let's hear from each of you about how folks can stay in touch and learn more about what your organizations are able to offer. Michael, why don't we start with?
Okay.
All right. So for us and how we continue to stay connected to the small business community is by continuing to provide real life and timely resources. So one takeaway, you can go to smallbusinessresources.wf.com. And on there, you will find ideas and really ideas to stimulate thought on 5 key areas: business strategy, capital considerations, connections, insights, and marketing. For us, we've heard from a lot of business owners on what's on their mind. It's why we center around those topics. And today, and what I shared, all of that is available on that site, and it's for customers or those that are not Wells Fargo customers today. And that's, to us, the most important component, and really what makes me most passionate about what I do. We know small businesses are better when small businesses succeed. So those resources are there to help stimulate the thought and then help you navigate to learn more about a topic that you may find important and or relevant to your small business. So again, smallbusinessresources.wf.com to learn more.
Excellent.
Again, ours is sba.gov. On that website, you can find information about the different funding programs, information about federal contracting, information about entrepreneurial development. And that's where you can find out about our different partners, SBDC or SCORE. You can find them from right now. We have loans available for right now to the end of the year. If you got to have this in before December 31st, EIDL loans. It's a 3.75% rate. It's a 30-year term. In fact, the first 2 years, you can defer payment. You still got interest still build up, but it's good money that people can have access to. So at this time, you got to go to sba.gov, sign up for your local assistance, work with your local offices, work with your local banker, and work with local lenders, and join those chambers, join those organizations like Latino Coalition, and start going and listening to seminars like this to learn as much as you can. The resources are out there. It's going to take some, it's not going to be easy, but it's going to take some investment of time. We talk about investment of your capital. It takes investment of time as well, and be as prepared as possible.
Thank you, Michael, Joseph. I can't tell you how much we appreciate your time and your wisdom and your information. Thank you all so very much. And to all of you, our viewing audience, on behalf of the Latino Coalition, thank you for joining us today. And our next Match Point webinar will be on November 17th with Jacqueline Edison, who's the business consultant and field faculty for PTAC. She'll be showing us how to master writing a capability statement for your business. We mentioned that earlier. It's so important. You won't want to miss that. We hope today's hot topic was informative, and we look forward to seeing you on the 17th. And once again, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Joseph, for being with us today on this panel. And on a personal note, as a U.S. Air Force veteran myself, it's my pleasure to wish you all a happy Veterans Day.
Thank
to
you,
all
Danny.
of our veterans.
Thank you.
To those who are serving today and those who have served in the past, we honor you, we respect you, and we appreciate you every single day. Thank you again for tuning in.
Thank you.
And as always, stay safe, aim high, and thrive. We'll see you next time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Same to
Thank
you,
you,
Jeff.
everyone.
Good one. Okay, take care.
Thank you.